All right. Good morning, everyone. To start with, I would really hope and wish that you and your loved ones are staying safe. On behalf of Goldman Sachs, I would like to welcome you all for this FinTech symposium that we have put together over the next 3 days with differentiated speakers from 12 to 14 odd different companies across the board. Before we get started, just to introduce myself quickly, I'm Rahul Jain. I head research at Goldman Sachs India as well as head the financial sector. In our inaugural session today, we've got HDFC Bank. The bank is represented by Parag Rao, who heads the payment business technology and digital banking. He's joined by Ramesh Lakshminarayanan, who is a chief information officer, Anjani Rathore, who is a chief digital officer, and last but not the least, Srini, who you all are familiar with. Before we kick off our session, a quick round of disclaimers. This call is strictly for the clients of Goldman Sachs only. This conversation is not intended for the media and is off the record. Participants will be removed from the call if they cannot be properly identified. And this call is not for the purpose of sharing or receiving any material non-public information. The format of this event is fireside chat, but in case you have any questions, you may please raise your hand, or alternatively, you can email me on my email ID rahul.m.jain@gs.com. Once again, thank you everyone, and thanks to Parag and the team. So let's start the session. Parag, I'll move to you. Can you just quickly talk us about what are the key pillars for India's fintech story that you believe, and how is the banks playing a role in this whole fintech evolution in this country? Maybe we can start with that, and then I have certain specific questions that we can go through. But with that, Parag, over to you.
Unmute yourself, Parag.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Sorry, I think that's a central control. Yeah. Okay, fine. So good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being on this chat session. Thank you, Rahul, for organizing this. It's always a pleasure to talk to the investor community and the investor analyst community. And it's a lovely subject. Obviously, we're in the heat of all of this transformation, which not just India, but globally we're going through. To specifically answer your question, okay, what are the key drivers and what's the role of banks generally, and what HDFC Bank is doing in this space? Well, clearly, I think, and I'll give you the larger backdrop, notwithstanding what we have been going through in the last 2 years, which is the pandemic. I mean, even if I were to sort of remove that, I think there are a lot of positives which have come out of the pandemic. But fundamentally, we see that India is a large domestic consumption country. We all know that. Okay. And to that extent, whilst even 10 years back, a lot of the consumption was driven in the top 5, 6, 7, 8 metros. Clearly, that's become federated and democratized, and therefore you see that consumption pattern being replicated, if not actually exceeding in the larger part of the country. So you've got a very vibrant middle class, upper middle class, and an aspirant, if you may call so, the category below the middle class, which is aspirational. Significant amount of, if you may call so, disposable income being now made available. And so at the baseline level, there's a whole pool of consumption available. Earlier, it was for basic stuff. Now, I mean, obviously, aspirational stuff, conspicuous consumption, all of that, we're clearly seeing that it's visible. And I don't want to really quote examples, but across sectors, whether it's services, whether it's products, whether it is high end, low end, etc., the kind of consumption which is sort of which we see is significantly sort of growing day by day. Along with that core basic economic consumption sort of pool available, what's also happening is 2, 3 other things. Obviously, internet spread has helped drive a lot of availability of information and easy access to purchasing. So purchasing power, tapping into this whole purchasing power, the internet has played a very seminal role. This is again at an ecosystem level. At a consumer level, you've seen smartphones and other intelligent devices, which you may call access devices, essentially, which have given all of this large consumer pool the whole capability to tap into the entire supply chain which is driving a lot of this consumption or feeding this consumption. Okay, information and the capability and the power to sort of choose. I think these are very large key drivers, which is shaping not just consumption in terms of qualitative parameters and quantitative parameters, but also a lot of brand choices, and therefore actually breeding competition. The third key driver, which is also happening, and as the advent of these two, is when customers demand choices and when they have a lot of choice available. I think what's only going to happen is that customers are going to be that much more demanding on their service providers in terms of the kind of interfaces, the kind of information, the kind of UI UXs, as we call in sort of technical terms, or the customer interfaces, customer service, etc. Significant heightened levels of excellence in all of these parameters. So this is what we generally call the digital piece. So all of these seminal changes are happening. I'm not getting into the other macro changes which are happening, which is driven by the government and a lot of other things. Srini can sort of add on to that in a separate sort of debate. But these are the key 3-4 drivers as I see happening. An outcome of these fundamental drivers, you've seen obviously the influx of a lot of global fintechs coming into India, and of course the emergence, a very welcome emergence of this whole fintech community in India. Okay, so the role of fintechs in this space very clearly is building strong digital edifices which feed into this whole need of customers to have instant information, instant power of choice, the ability to choose, the ability to transact, with their principles, etc., etc. Now, if that be the case, okay, and we've seen over the last 2 to 3 years, each and every category actually, how do I say, bursting away in terms of the kind of top line numbers which you clearly see, whether it be payment transactions, whether it be in our own consumptions as consumers, all of us in this room. Okay, we clearly see that going up. Now, in this, as you call, and fintechs are typically called the newer players in this game, you have a lot of these existential questions which really come up. Are they disrupting? What are they doing in this space? How are they sort of changing consumer demands? What is the role of the so-called traditional players in this space? And now I'll zoom down to sort of the financial industry and banks in particular. What's the role of these people? The way we see it in HDFC Bank, I think expansion of consumption, expansion of choices, I think is an inevitable path of any developing economy. Okay, that's very clear. We've seen it ever since liberalization started. Okay, and more so over the last 5 to 8 years. So that's a done. Okay, that's point number one. Traditional banks like ours, okay, which were, by the way, and let me mention to you, it's an important point. 25 years ago, HDFC Bank was a startup. Okay, and of course that era was slightly different. Okay, we brought onto the table at that point in time a significant new way of banking, what we called anywhere, everywhere banking. We were the first to sort of launch a debit card in those times. We were probably one of the fastest growing ATM networks. We adopted a lot of centralized automation, electronification of our systems. We centralized our operating capability so that it gave us the capability to deliver products and services across scale. We had a very strong centralized way of underwriting or credit underwriting so that we could look at a very controlled manner of picking up data on customers, underwriting them, and developing the very strong and quality asset franchise which we've really, which all of you see in our balance sheets today. The full suite strategy of the bank, which is offer all products and services in the financial services game, in the sort of arena which the bank played, I think very clearly played out, because whether it was deep in South Bombay or deep hinterland, okay, doesn't really matter. A customer could get the access to the entire suite of banking products, whether it be an individual consumer or a corporate or an institution, what have you, etc. A combination of these factors put together, plus the clear ethos to say that let's give simple products, let's make them available for customers at the point in which sort of they want to interact with, whether it be online, at the ATMs and the branches. Okay, a philosophy of keeping them simple and evolving needs clearly brought HDFC Bank to this level. Okay, now in this emerging game, what's really happening? I think one of the seminal roles which I think the new age economy sort of is bringing in is a expansion of the consumption. I think this is only fantastic for all the traditional players. And when I come to the bank, we look at it as a fantastic opportunity to multiply our quality franchise across this huge, large demand base. What do I mean by that? Very simply put, all the players put together, traditional and the new age, if you may call so, are actually bringing on many more customers, new customers to the fold, whether it be of using digital means, whether it mean added ways of consumption. And I'll give you just 2, 3 examples which sort of will bring home what I actually talk about. Um, and I think together we're sort of looking at it. I'll give you the examples which I talked about. Look at okay, 2 examples. Let's look at in-house food consumption, and let's look at local travel, which we all do. Okay, in-house food consumption, we all know of Swiggy and Zomato. If you actually analyze your consumption, food consumption bill, you'll probably realize that in most families, your food consumption has gone up 2.5 times, 3 times in a month as compared to even a couple of months ago. Why? Simple, easy availability of food. It's also diversified our palate, if you may call so. So today you have a situation where even in a family of 4, you may actually have 3 different cuisines being consumed at a point in time. Why? It's available. It's available at the tap of a button, simply pay. Okay, that's an example of diversity of, if you may call, consumption and a significant increase in food consumption. Okay, whether you like it or not, whether it's healthy or not, okay, it's increased. Similar to do with with local travel or intra-city travel. With the advent of Olas and Ubers, I think it's clearly democratized our need to sort of travel. Today, you don't even need to own a car or a two-wheeler. Hire a cab, go there, pay off, fill it, shut it, forget it type of mentality, get back again any time of the day, any time of the night. Um, you don't have to depend on the Kali Pili taxis or the or depend on someone to give you a drop. It's safe, secure. These are just 2 examples of how consumption is a thing with the advent of some new players coming in. Now, what is the role of such of the financial services, etc.? Fundamental to the financial services business is what you call liabilities, what we call in terminology, but in simple layman's terms, it's the need to store your wealth, move money from point A to point B. That's what we call liabilities. The need to borrow money, which you call lending, or assets, if you may call so, to help you consume more, or whether it's corporates or consumers, and of course the need to pay or receive money, okay, which we typically call payments. This is the edifice, and that the network of this is laid by the extremely large coverage done by the entire banking and the NBFC community, if you may also put together, the private, multinational, public sector banks, and of course all the NBFCs put together. Okay, that's fundamental and core to the business. This community, if you may call so, banking, financial services, drive the value chain in terms of the entire financial services committee. Come to the new age order. What is the role of banking? And as you see, you hear a lot of examples. But at HDFC Bank, what is it that we are clearly doing? We clearly understand that there's a new age customer who demands services and products in a different manner as compared to the conventional need. Okay, he wants it simpler, easier, single tap. He wants it on access devices of his choice, and he wants it in the access channels of his choice and anywhere, everywhere. Okay, so therefore, banks like HDFC Bank and at that point in time, I'll briefly touch upon it, and I'll sort of lead into what where Anjani and Ramesh can then take you in some more of the details. We're clearly saying that we've built a lot of strengths, which is what we call the conventional bank. Okay, but we also need to add on to the traditional bank by looking at how do you also enter the digital age, and therefore how do you modernize the bank so that we can also cater to this new set of demands and requirements by the set of customers. So what have we done? Getting straight down to what we've done. We've created 2 important strategic entities in the bank. We call them the digital factory and we call them the enterprise factory. What is the role of the digital factory and the enterprise factory? The enterprise factory and the digital factory clearly are poised to do 2 key things. The enterprise factory is looking at running and modernizing the existing bank as you see it. I'll give you some examples of it and lead you into some of the more detailed, which Ramesh and Anjani can take you. The digital factory, the role of the digital factory is very clearly to build new digital products, platforms, competencies, and skill sets. Okay, which are going to help the bank add on more of these products and services which today consumers are requirement. I talked about the 24/7 access device and access channel of any type. Okay, these two entities are driving the transformation of the bank, which is fundamentally saying take the strengths of the traditional bank which you see today, add on to the strengths by building and modernizing the existing bank and the new digital edifice, so that the new bank which you see over the next couple of months, it's a journey which I talked about, will be far more stronger. The key pillars of both the enterprise factory and the digital factory are the following. We're looking at building very strong resiliency, scalability in our platforms and products. This gives us a clear ability to scale infinitely and therefore meet the kind of significant consumption and demand which is built up. We're focusing on extremely user-friendly UI UX system, also customer interfaces, interfaces which customers love, interfaces which deliver information and the capability to choose products and consume products instantly. We're looking at an extremely strong multi-channel or omni-channel way in which customers can interact with the bank and have a continuous stream. So customer can connect with the bank in one medium, let's say the internet. Okay, he may also tweet tomorrow, or he may want to walk into a branch tomorrow. All of these are interconnected so that he gets a seamless experience. We are modernizing the capability of the bank at the back end, which means using new age technologies like the cloud, which gives us significant scale, which gives us significant nimbleness to be able to churn out products and services in tune with the kind of needs and customize it and parameterize right down to the power of one customer. Okay, and one very important strategic pillar which we've been working on for the last couple of years, Srini mentioned it, is that we work with a lot of partners. When I say partners, I mean not just tech partners, but also partners which are facing the consumer end. So partnerships and alliances, okay, is a very strong edifice of this. The philosophy of this partnership and alliances vertical is very clearly to say, we will focus on the areas which as a bank we are allowed to work in because we're a regulated entity and which is our clear domain. We will partner with world-class, global-class partners who bring to the table products, services, capabilities, technology, etc. And together we would create some of these edifices which sort of we talk about. Okay, specifically on the digital factory and the enterprise factory, I'll pause here at this point in time. Okay, and sort of lead into questions, but I'd sort of now hand it over to Ramesh in this case to really talk a little bit about the enterprise factory and see how HDFC Bank is actually preparing ourselves for this kind of a the new age future, which we sort of all are talking about. So Ramesh,
actually, yeah. Before we hand it over to Ramesh, I'll also chip in a few questions I've got, which okay. Ramesh might use it, may look to use it in his address. Is the apps experience and the outages experience? How critical are these two? Because outages we've seen, some of the payments bank, have got a much smaller rates than some of the larger banks out there, and the apps, which is UI, etc. Maybe Anjani can also come in there. So these are two other areas where investors would want you all to comment as well. So yeah, with that, Ramesh, over to you. Ramesh and Anjani.
I think you'll have to unmute him.
Just a minute. I can't see them. Yeah, unmuted. Can you see it?
Yeah, now we can. I think you can hear us now.
Yeah.
So thanks.
Anjani, again, you've gone on mute. Just a minute. I don't know why. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So I think thanks, Rahul, and thanks, Parag. We will take these two questions, but before that, I just thought maybe I'll come to the moot point on the enterprise factory, and what are we thinking those lines, and why? Where are we going? I think it's important. I think these questions have come, thick and fast over last, few months, so to say. And we've seen a lot of banks talking about digital strategies, about API banking, neo banks, and a lot of these things are coming at our way, right? So what we have done is we've taken a step back here. So the way we are looking at this is to go back to the design board and look at it a little bit more holistically. So if you see today, a lot of banking system, there are multiple challenges, right? The tech side. So if you look at it, a lot of it is to do with coming off the legacies, right? And it's a global problem. It's not something, it's an India-centric problem. It's a global problem because banks were architected 25 years back on core banking systems, largely monolithic architectures, Java-based, platforms, which was good from an automation perspective. These were built from an automation perspective, back-end automation, digitization, the backends and all. And then over the last few years, the world has moved in a different direction from a front-end digitization perspective. So what banks did or have been doing or reacting is largely on the front-end side, changing the UI UX interface, bringing the APIs interface in the middle. These all have to be done, and that's pretty much what HDFC has also been doing. But we took a little fundamental shift now, saying unless you do something about the backend, right, unless you fix the backend, you're not going to kind of see the kind of seminal change that Parag spoke about. And why is it that? What do I mean by that? Today, if you see the UPI transaction, take a simple example. I mean, from something like very small steps today, we do almost about 50 lakh transactions an hour. Okay, on our core banking, our TPSs, which were about transaction per second, which were about 400, 500, have gone up to 1500 to 1600 over last two years, just in this last 2-year phase. And when you are seeing this kind of scale, monolithic architectures in core banking will continue to come under pressure because you're writing ultimately into one place at a scale. So, and what is so different about it in fintech and other worlds is that they came in a different direction, mostly adopting cloud and horizontal scalability, what is called as being able to scale on multiple geographies. Right? This is the fundamental way of working, and that has to be changed. So what we believe now is clearly to look at the backend in a different perspective. And that's why this enterprise vehicle is extremely critical. And what we are doing in this enterprise vector is going back to the design board, and we are rewriting, recreating, partnering, on solutions that are first of all cloud native, container ready stacks. Okay, they're not kind of traditional legacy stacks. Secondly, they come with a structure which is called active-active, which means clearly at any point of time you do not have any breakages, irrespective of where the transaction is originated. Thirdly, the scale. It just doesn't matter. These are on demand scale, right? So these are three fundamental shifts that we're doing in this direction. And to be able to do this, the way we are using this enterprise factory vehicle, we are going back to drawing board. Like I said, a lot of investment. We're creating these factories in centers like Bangalore, in Pune, in Hyderabad. And the idea is now to start opening up the talent. See, what the biggest thing that drives this game is the talent, the tech talent. Large banks have been pushing, in terms of a program management, project management talents for very long. And that was okay in those days when you would get your tech partner, make it work. But today you have to own design and architecture. There is no other way that you can go about it. So when I say this, these factories where we are setting up now, we are bringing talents that understand design architecture at a much more depth level. So when you build a product, it's going to sustain the scale, resilience, the capabilities of the new age architecture for a very long term. And through this factory approach, we started now looking at 2-3 approaches. One, in some areas we are co-creating or co-partnering, not necessarily with large tech providers, not with the legacy tech providers. We are actually going to some of the new age fintech unicorns coming up the curve, who are probably kind of have a very, very in-depth, experience of architecting technology on cloud. So that's one approach. There are places where we started building for future, where we have also started saying that, okay, let's start developing on our own in some areas. And then, overlay with competency. So what we're looking at the talent pool is not just, just kind of bringing project management. Like I said, we're looking at competencies like cloud, API, DevOps, data engineering. And what we're now doing is this factory would largely be creating tech skills and tech projects for the future. And this factory would largely be looking at replacing the legacy architecture while the legacy continues to be run. So the difference here is that we are not kind of intermingling the current operational technology with the new. So we're creating a separate line, and the separate line works in a very different way. It adopts cloud models, it adopts, looks at microservice architecture, it works with fintechs, with big techs, it works on different kind of skills from the technology area, and they work dedicated to recreate these assets, so to say. So that's the fundamental difference between the current architecture and the enterprise architecture. And the third muscle that Parag spoke about is the digital factory, which I'll let Anjani talk. But the way we look at it, the journeys will start. We start in the front end. Will start through the digital factories. We're again looking at the experience, user experience, the amplification, the kind of sophistication of AIML-led decisions come onto the front end. All of that will come from the digital factory. It will be built on the enterprise factory, new age technologies. And we've started this journey a few months back, and we start expecting a lot of progress on this. And as I said, while we do these two things, I also want to be very candid that we will continue to focus on the enterprise architecture. So we continue on our existing platforms, make them more resilient, because that's the only way you can do. So it's like a two-pronged strategy, so to say, between digital factory, enterprise factory, create new front-end assets, replace the back-end legacy with new technology, and continue to run the existing platforms in a separate container. So that's how we are looking at this whole strategy. We would start. We've already started work on this on this side. So that's pretty much I wanted to just come in, and then if you to move back.
Thank you, Ramesh. So how do we create the product for the new age world, which is largely consumer internet centric world? That is where digital factory comes into play, where every product and service, whether it is on the onboarding side or transactions or services, it is done in a very seamless manner. It is contextual, seamless, zero touch, paperless, where customers can get onboarded on their own. They can do transactions on their own. They can do all the servicing on their own. And this kind of capability is being handled in the digital factory, where we are getting talent from the new age technology companies, new age product companies, and working with them to ensure that we are building the new construct, the new way of engaging with the customer. And this is a combination. This is on-stage work, which is happening in digital factory. And as Ramesh mentioned, there's a lot of backstage work, which is also needed in terms of API, data engineering, which has to happen. And that's what is happening in the enterprise factory. And collectively, it's becoming a product which is seamless, and it is meant for the new age internet world where adoption can happen easily. So that's how this whole combination is working.
There's a question on the outages, which Rahul mentioned. I just thought I'll just kind of come in there. So clearly, and I think it's a topical because everybody has kind of spoken about the outage. We've seen a number of outages, not just with HDFC Bank, across the board over last year and a half, and that's probably part of the ecosystem that's playing out, right, in terms of the digital explosion, in terms of the legacy architecture coming through. And that's where I think, like I said, contextually, we have to move the needle. And I spoke about the fact like active. Now, take an example. What is active? Today, if you look at a traditional architecture, you cannot go on active. Why? Because you will need a timeline to switch to a DR. Because the technology means you'll first shut down, or you will first, the primary goes down, and you have to bring up the DR. And there is a timeline between the two. And that's the timeline when, it was okay a few years back, it's not okay now, right, from a customer experience perspective. So clearly, that's why the backend like engineering is very, very critical to be able to put something like this. Which is where, let me just give you an example. One of the components that we are talking from an enterprise factory is to look at something like a payments hub, what would it do? It would ensure that, okay, you've kind of come on a payment cycle into the bank's digital asset. Now it could happen that at that point of time that particular core banking instance is down, or it's kind of that's
I
not
think your
what the
line is
customer wants. So if you go to sorry,
I think,
Rahul.
Ramesh, we lost you for the last 30 seconds. If you don't mind repeating.
No, I'll just repeat that. So in the current scenario, if you look at it, something like a payment architecture, you will find that somebody coming in onto the to the core banking, and for some reason core banking has not responded, you will get the transaction denied, right? That's what happens. Why? Technically, if you know the last balance updated few seconds back, and you could put a limit on that, and you can clear that payment because it's an urgent payment, you should be able to do that, right? And that's how the designs of the future would work like. Similarly, today look at which payment. Why should I come on a UPI 1 lakh, between this time and NEFT between this time? Who decides? For a customer, it is just one payment. You decide the time at which you made the payment. You decide which rail you want to put it through because that's the fastest way to go through. So these are some of the design principles that are changing in the new age technology from a resiliency perspective. And the only way you can kind of handle this outages will happen, but how do you narrow it down to the level that a particular instance goes down, the next instance is up and running in such a short span? In some of these technologies, you could go as low as few seconds, and customer doesn't even realize, right? Which is perfectly okay. And that is where the backend architecture and the enterprise factory approach that I spoke about is extremely critical. It is not just about the front end changing and the amplification and the UI experience that a lot of banks are going after. That's the fundamental, I would say, difference between the HDFC Bank strategy and the other bank strategy. We are looking at both front end and the back end re-engineering, and we are creating a separate line. It's not about putting the ambitions are very, very different. It's very difficult to do something like this because your existing organizations have to be run effectively, tech organizations. So this is a leap of faith we have taken, and we are kind of executing that the back end.
Sorry, Ramesh, Parag, why don't we, because the audience would sort of, I'm sure, love to hear. Maybe let's give them 3 examples of the kind of change we're bringing in. One example, if we can give them about how we've changed what we've done in the UPI architecture and how we're now geared to manage multiple X volumes, which we were even 6 months ago at a level. That's one. 2 is how we're changing the cloud architecture so that we can get this infinite scale, and what's our approach and how it is different to and even better than many of the other fintechs which you're doing. And the third is, Anjani, if you could talk about how we're partnering with Adobe to give a fantastic customer experience. This is something which maybe the audience would love to hear in terms of 3 examples.
Great point, Parag. In fact, that gives you a perspective into 3 different aspects of the problems, right? So let's look at the first problem. Take something like UPI. As I said, the volumes are exploding, and this is one of the areas that clearly every bank is going through. And take today UPI architecture. What is the UPI architecture? It just takes away the wallet, right? It's a synchronous architecture where every debit to the account and the credit to the account is synchronous, which means the transaction is end-to-end synchronous mode. It's not offline. It's actually a real-time online kind of a mode. Now, what does it mean? It means that every time you do a 10 rupee transaction, a 20 rupee transaction, a dream 11, coupon on a pre-IPL match, that debit of 10, 15 rupees, 20 rupees will finally end up coming to the core banking architecture, which is a monolithic architecture. So which means each of those millions of transactions have to be written on core banking database, and a debit has to be passed and the consequent credit has to be passed. Now, when you run at such TPS, such large transaction per seconds, that's where systems come under stress. What are we done? If you look at it, our own story on UPI, so this cannot be like, for example, resolved overnight. You can't wish that, I have horizontal database running from 3 different geographies and all of this can be done, because the technology doesn't in the old legacy world doesn't exist. In fact, every core banking architecture today runs on what is called as monolithic RDBMS, where it works on one single instance kind of stuff. So how do we do it? So what we have started doing is, okay, we said, okay, let's have two-pronged plan. One, work immediately to see how do we reduce the load on core banking. So a simple example on UPI side now, we've started kind of looking at in a different design pattern where our, UPI processing logics have moved from core banking into front-end gateway. We are no longer kind of taking the logic back to the core banking. A lot of balance inquiries that come on UPI do not have to go to core banking. It can come out of the cache. So we've kind of started moving into what is called as cloud native caching technologies, which can help out to not go back to core and fetch a balance. It can actually give a balance from a cache, which is a little bit on the front end side. Second stage we have started looking at is to partner with some of the large big tech players to say, can the switch itself go on cloud? Which means when the switch comes with infinite hits, and it's a very interesting example in UPI, what happens is even one bank out of, let's say, 10 banks has a problem. The problem actually seeps into the entire ecosystem because it's a synchronous call. So what we have to do as banks, we have to intelligently route. So we have to see which banks, for example, suddenly the connection has come in a very different way. So there's been a down in one of the ecosystem banks. We have to manage our connections in a way that they don't get piled up in the middleware. And they're largely kind of looking at it from a kind of a governance perspective. We're orchestrating and you are able to ensure that the customer transaction is still kind of initiated. This kind of structural change. So what we have done is first we've started tuning our existing, which is the short-term approach. Then we started looking at, okay, mid-term approach of how do we change our existing middlewares to handle. And then the third phase, we are going and saying, okay, let's start looking at a complete revamp of the payment switch itself on cloud so that you can actually serve completely, on an elastic basis. And that's where the second part that Parag brought out is cloud is so integral to the strategy. Why is I'm saying that? Because you would see a lot of banks have done their own on-prem databases, data centers, running it in a single location, trying to kind of partner with some of the large data center operators. But the problem with that is that you will not get scale at the way you want. It's not an on-demand scaling. So most of the banks run on virtual machines, which were good 20 years back, but they don't run container structure, which is a very cloud native kind of a technology. So what we are doing is we are started extending our cloud. So we just recently gone with partnership with very two large hyperscalers, globally, and we started extending our data centers into these hybrid clouds. And why is it important? Because the minute I've started putting a pipe and why I can't just go to cloud, because your core banking cannot move to cloud overnight. You still have to run it in the current architecture. So all the assets that we spoke about, be the new customer experience hub, the new payment solution, the new solutions around payment area, all of that, we are not building those solutions now on-prem solution. We are saying these have to be done on cloud. They have to be cloud native, which means they have to be microservices, containerized architecture. And from there, so by doing this bridging, by extending our data center into the large hypervisors, AWS, GCP, Azure kind of hypervisors, hyperscalers, what we have done is we have now been able to take the new solutions onto the cloud platform and start building scale on them. So that is the second part of the strategy, which Parag. So as a bank now, we are very clear that any new solution that we are creating, co-creating, developing, buying, it is ready for cloud deployment on day zero. It does not. So you stop the leaking bucket. That's a very important point that I wanted to bring in. So these are two examples of how so today, if you look at our UPI story, I spoke about it from being one of the, kind of, I would say, a high technical decline last year, late last year. We are actually now best in class at the volumes that none of our even fintech banks are competing with. Of course, we have still a long way to go, but a lot of good effort has happened in terms of re-architecting this architectural journey. And this is how we will go about every asset. Cloudify it, APify it, build it in the new structure, and then keep scaling up from here on. So that, I hope that answers what Parag spoke about. And the third question.
I'll just take one example of how customer journey is changing. with this new framework that we are putting in place. So we started looking at all the onboarding journey. That's one part of the journey where a lot of customers actually come into the banking fold, or they are taking a new product. And I'll take one example of offering a loan to a carded customer. See, earlier there used to be several touch points, and it would require some curing, some processing, credit underwriting. Now what happens is, if a customer comes to a site, just enters the mobile number, you get to know what cards the customer has and what is the credit limit which is available. The customer has the ability to do simulation, that I have this much of credit which is possible for me to take. This is the interest rate, and they can also play with it like an abacus. So you can choose your duration. You want it for 1 year, 3 year, 2 year, what kind of loan are you looking for? And at the end of the journey, when customer confirms, that amount is credited. So it is available in a matter of few minutes. A customer, without talking to any banker, is able to take that product on their own. Now, what does this do? We are using an application, and we've partnered with Adobe, which is already known. It's a cloud native completely. It's not inside our data center. It's available in the cloud. It talks through APIs which are available within the bank, what Ramesh has been referring to. And that whole experience is created in a manner that it doesn't require a user manual or a lot of training for anybody who's uninitiated to come and take that product. Being in cloud, tomorrow if the load goes up all of a sudden, it can be capacitized. During festive season, if people want to interact more with the bank, that capacity can be added immediately. So based on the seasonality, it can be changed for capacity, and different products can come in. This is just one example. There are several products across assets, liabilities, payments, and all the journeys can have a very similar experience as long as the API and the backend is able to support it. So this is one example, and the adoption and uplift that comes is not incremental. When you do something like this, it is always disruptive because people are able to do it on their own. They find it easy. A lot of people play with the simulation, go back and come back later, and are able to take that product as well.
Interesting. A lot is happening. I know we are running a little tight on time, so I'll let Madhu ask. He has a question. Let me unmute him. Madhu, you can go ahead, please.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for that wonderful perspective. I have two quick questions. The first one is, with the shift towards containerization and cloud, if you could also talk a little bit about, simultaneously what kind of data tools you're using, because when we conduct our channel checks, it seems like, it's still, there is some use of Hadoop, but, it's still pretty heavy on Tableau. But not some of the more new age database management technologies. So one is that, and the second thing is completely unrelated. Once you guys answer this, I'll get to that.
Yeah, so I think I'll take that, Madhu. It's an interesting question that you said because see, the data technologies have also gone through. So there are two aspects. First of all, the database technology. Let's start about database. Largely, if you look at it, Madhu, it's been dominated by the classical RDBMS players, the Oracles, the MS SQLs of the world. They were pretty good in the initial stage. Why is it that? Because they used to follow what is called as transaction writing principles, called ACID actually in technology terms. They were very good at integrity, because one of the biggest things in the banking industry was to write the integrity. When you write a transaction, it should get written. You cannot kind of halfway get lost or get corrupted and stuff like that, right? So it's a interesting dimension. But what happened? They were all writing on monolithic areas. So it's just basically in one area, these tables would be in one place. Then what these technologies evolved over a period of time, they said, okay, I can kind of create another copy, which is called RAC actually, real-time access controller, which basically kind of ensure that there's another copy lying next to the same data center. Then they moved to a near DR. Okay, so can I go to a DR which is probably 20 kilometers away? That was also okay because it was still sustainable. So you would get a core banking down on a database. You would still move, let's say, in reasonable time, maybe 1.5 hours, 2 hours to kind of point the database to the DR and then re-architect or redirect the application. But the cloud world came from very different. So today, if you look at it, cloud world came from NoSQL world. So, the new technologies like, Hadoop was a little earlier than that. A lot of MongoDB kind of technologies that come, NoSQL kind of technology that come. where you could kind of horizontally scale, which means you could write a transaction here in Mumbai, at the same time you could write a transaction in Bangalore, in Delhi, or in New York. No problems actually. But that was not on structured data. So the transaction integrity with which you have to write at scale, because most of the fintechs or the cloud techs did not have to do financial integrity. That started changing. What has happened of late is, if you see a lot of work happening in this area, technology is just called horizontally scalable persistent databases. So there are very interesting platforms coming in the form of Google Spanner has done very interesting what's called RDS actually, which is very interestingly able to write on multi geolocations. On top of this, a lot of new age database players that are coming. For example, players like Cockroach DB, Yugabyte DB, and some of these. What it fundamentally does is that the minute you write a transaction, so which means let's say you do a debit of 20 rupees on Mumbai, you are able to take the debit to, let's say, even as far as, let's say, Chennai, and you are able to instantly write it. And that is a very different, and there is no change, which means there is no time there is no time that you need to take to flip the databases. This is an evolving space. You will find a lot of Valley-based, Bangalore-based, deep research happening in the database area and the horizontal scalable databases. And then, of course, it's also been complemented by what is called as PubSub technologies today, where a lot of ability to kind of drain the data from one system and push it to another system quickly and at scale. That's also, so technologies like Kafka, PubSub, Google PubSub have evolved now. And the combination of this is what is driving the cloud, resiliency theme, so to say. It's no longer about the Oracles, MS SQLs, and some of the old RDBMS. It's the world is shifted to some of the new age databases. We have started our journey. In fact, as I said, our goal is the new assets that are being built are not built on monolithic databases. In fact, one of our newest products is at a very small scale. We actually used one of these horizontal scalable databases, and we already started seeing differences. This journey will continue in the enterprise factory, and we would kind of, I do see this as a pioneering effort. Like I said, we're not talking about it too much because we do believe that some of this has to be done silently and brought onto the table, because this is the new age resiliency architecture. And we will move into that. So I just wanted to kind of, reinforce that. So I hope that answers the question, Madhu.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And my second quick question was for Parag and Srini, which is, if you could talk a little bit about your merchant acquisition. Obviously, historically, you've always had a tremendous franchise in the country, at least on the POS side in terms of TPV processed. But one of the large competitor banks has now come out with an offering of instant same-day settlement of funds for merchants. So how should we think about you defending the POS merchant acquisition franchise? And to extend the same question, if you could also talk about UPI merchant acquisition and overall what kind of lending opportunities in terms of working capital financing you see in the space.
Parag, you're talking, but you are muted. The line is muted.
Okay.
No.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll answer that question in sort of two parts. Thanks for the question. First, I'll actually want to talk a little bit about. I thank Ramesh and Anjani for giving us a lot of insight into how we're building this architecture to sort of look at this change. I want to spend a couple of minutes on two important, if you may call, customer-facing or market-facing strategies, important things which we are adopting, and then I'll get to your specific question about the marketing. I'll talk about two parts. Our core market-facing strategy is leverage our current strength, which we built over the last 25 years, and partners, and partnering with the fintech and a lot of new players coming into the place. Okay, I'll give you two examples. We are clearly approaching very large segments through what we call an ecosystem approach, and I'll give you two examples. We've taken up multiple sectors, large sectors in the economy. Let's take two examples, the healthcare segment and the auto segment. Here, our approach is that we are building what we call, we are having a platform approach to these segments. As a bank, we are one of our we are the largest financiers today and bankers in the healthcare segment, which means fundamentally we deal with hospitals, primary cares, large hospital cares, a lot of the medical stores. We deal with the doctors as consumers, etc., etc. All of this entire ecosystem, which are parts of the ecosystem, as a preferred bank. What we said is, what was our strategy? How can we bring all of them together in one digital platform, partner with digital partners and a lot of the ecosystem partners alike, and thereby bring a solution to consumers, to hospitals, to suppliers to the hospitals, to the doctors who are sort of part of that ecosystem, and consumers at large, so that in one digital platform, they can avail of all healthcare services, financing services for their healthcare, and also things like ancillary services like healthcare insurance, etc., etc., and all in one place. That this is one clear initiative, and you'll see the outcome of that over the next couple of months, wherein we actually go to the market. And this is one clear approach which we're adopting. So we're taking our strengths in each of the individual pieces, platformizing it, bringing it in a digital form, and addressing the entire needs of that segment. So we're doing a similar thing in the auto space. As you know, we're the largest financer in the auto finance space. We deal with all the OEMs, we deal with all the dealerships, and we've got an extremely robust and fast-growing franchise in the auto space. Here, what we said is we looked at the consumer need and say, can we create a digitized platform wherein, starting from the thought process of wanting to buy a car, if I have an existing car, how do I buy a replacement car or buy a new car, to taking and introducing him to the various brands, taking the customer through the journey of meeting up with dealers, maybe virtually, doing test drives, building up choices, looking at his financing options, tying up with the best possible auto insurance capability, accessories, etc., if he needs funding, and the entire life cycle journey of this thing. We're building what we call an auto first platform, which again you'll see in the next couple of months, so that one customer needs to go only one place. Okay, so that's an ecosystem or a platform approach which we're using to adopt to address large segments. We've identified close to 8 segments, such segments in the inside. I've given you 2 examples. Quickly moving to the partnerships thing. Here we are talking, and I'm sorry, I'm not at privilege to sort of reveal the names, but we are dealing with, just to give you 3 examples, one very large fintech, we're dealing with one large mobile operator, and we're dealing with a very large multi-business conglomerate. Here we're talking of a co-partnered approach to the marketplace, wherein we're offering a combination of a digital platform which gives them digital payment instruments, a digital acceptance platform, and digital lending. Okay, once again, you'll see the results of these coming out over the next 3 to 4 months. Fundamentally, what are we looking at? What do we bring to the table as a large bank, and what do we get? We bring to the table our very significant strengths in centralized underwriting, our ability to provide a full suite of financial services products to the table. We bring to the table our capability to sort of build to scale and do a lot of operational capability in a digitized manner. Okay, what do the partners bring to the table? I think they bring to the table their expertise in their specific domains of dealing with customers, and these are large customers. I talked to you about fintech and mobile operator. It would have given you an idea of the scale which we're talking about. Digital is about scale, but we also believe that that scale needs to also deliver value, profitability, if you may call so. So we're very focused on that. So to the partners, we bring that capability of full suite financial services in a digitized manner. The partners bring to the table the ability to offer a full suite digital co-branded or co-partnered product to their customers. And therefore, we believe that's a very strong win-to-win ecosystem. And like I said, you'll see the results of these over the next 2 to 3 months. So I thought it was important to sort of share with you how we're sort of partnering in the fintech space and not really looking at it as an individual thing. And with that, we really, once a lot of the restrictions on us are lifted, we actually get back to the market with the bank. Coming to your specific question about what's happening in the merchant space, we've clearly articulated our stance to say that over the next 3 to 4 years, we will grow from our current base of about 2.2, 2.3 million merchants going up to clearly 20 million merchants. A large portion of these merchants will come in what we call the long tail, the smaller merchants. These merchants are available in the sort of, suburbs of the metros, and of course a significant part of what we call the SURU, the semi-urban and rural parts of India. A lot of these merchants are large drivers of the of consumption economy. I talked about it when I sort of introduced this thing. Here, let me tell you, even today as we speak, okay, we acquire close to about 75 to 80,000 new merchants on a monthly basis, and that engine continues. I talked about the 3 partnerships just a couple of minutes ago. One of them is also about a partnership in the merchant acquiring space. And together, when we offer a full suite solution, we are a full suite merchant acquirer. So riding on our current strength, and just to sort of give you some factoids, in the POS space you mentioned, yes, we have close to about a 45% market share of the card volumes accepted on the POS machine, which is the physical merchants. In the e-com space, on the online space, we have actually a larger market share. Close to 50% of the market share of the electronic volumes are carried on the HDFC Bank acquiring network. Okay. Again, we're doing a platform approach in this whole move from a 2 to a 20 million thing. It's a one box, one bank, one asset sort of approach. We've already started out on a small scale basis. Once sort of these partnerships fructify over the next couple of months, you will actually see the power of that coming in. But fundamentally, like I said, the approach to our merchants will be, the strategy is what I call a sandwich strategy. Engage with merchants through the payment layer by giving them a one box, one payment solution. Okay, derive the liability relationship, which is the current account float and the family accounts and etc., as a result of engaging with him and being a preferred payment partner, and then using the data generated and the transactions which the merchant does on the merchant acquiring platform. We also give him lending immediately post entering into this relationship. Partnerships, as I said, put together, we will address the large merchants, the medium merchants, and the long tail merchants. And a significant portion of that idea is to really continue being dominating in the merchant acquiring space. I hope that sort of answers your question. Okay. Any follow-through questions, Rahul?
No, I think we have covered fair bit of breadth in the discussion, fairly comprehensive answers and commentary from you, Parag, and Anjani and Ramesh. Maybe I think, we are overrunning the time by 20 minutes, so I'll let you all, go as well. I'm really thankful for you being so generous. But this kind of, brings us to an end of the session. So thank you so much, all 3 of you, and Srini, you too as well. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.